Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 813. My opponent started off with d4, and I went with knight f6. And I was hoping to get a Nimzo Indian perhaps, especially after he went c4. So I went e6, and now I went knight f3. And so there are a number of different ways to play after this. d5, just transposing back into a queen's gambit declined, is one of the top choices. Another one, which I used to play a lot, is b6, going for a queen's Indian defense. There's bishop b4 check, the Bogo Indian, and c5, going for a Benoni or a Blumenfeld gambit. And so he played the move g3, which is kind of interesting. And you can see it's a fairly popular move, although I haven't seen it, just to show the idea of the Blumenfeld gambit, because I want to learn this gambit. I want to learn how to play it, so I want to get some practice with it. So I'm going to remind myself of how it goes. There's kind of two different ideas with the Blumenfeld gambit. After d5, what you do is you play b5. That's the Blumenfeld gambit. And then there's two ways that white can play it. He can take here, in which case you have to remember to take back with the f-pawn. That's the first kind of unusual move you have to get used to. But the idea is that you're giving up this b-pawn. That's why it's a gambit. But you get in the move d5. So you've got a big center here, and well, these extra pawns on the queen side won't matter a whole lot. And it seems like there's good compensation here for the pawn for black. So interesting way to play. Keeping in mind that this is a traditional kind of gambit, a Morphy style gambit, where you're playing, you're giving up a pawn for quick development and piece activity. So it's not like the Binko gambit where you're going for a long-term positional edge. That's not really the case here. What you're going for is center control and active piece placement. So there's another way white can play against this, which is rather than accepting the gambit by taking like that, white can play a bishop to g5. Maybe this is a little more troublesome. And it seems like going ahead and taking the pawn at this point is the best thing. And then I looked at this with d6. Seems like you get into a little bit of trouble. So I guess h6 is the move I would try in this position, if I ever get to it. And then that kind of, I'm not sure why that forces the exchange. If he drops back, yeah, maybe white just has nothing if he drops back, and black has easy development. So anyway, white normally takes, and then play this position. So this is no longer a gambit, and it seems like an interesting position that black can play. The chess engine gives white a slight edge in both cases, but no worse than a typical opening. So those are a couple ideas for the Blumenfeld gambit. Anyway, my opponent went g3 here, which is the second choice, and an interesting way to play, especially if white normally plays the Catalan. And I took, which is the main move, and looking at it later, it seems like that's the best response. What I'm a little bit surprised at is that after this exchange, in this position, knight takes d4 is normally played. He didn't play that. What I'm surprised at is I could not figure out, well, let's go ahead and put knight takes d4 on the board. I could not figure out what this opening is called. I ended up calling this the East Indian defense. I have to say the Lichess for the game gave it the name Blumenfeld Counter Gambit number 2 as the name of the opening. But I didn't want to call it that because we didn't actually get into the Blumenfeld Gambit, so I didn't feel it would be right to give it a title that indicates I'm playing a gambit when I'm not. So I'd be interested if anyone wants to do some research as to what this opening could be called. If I had the move d5 in already, this would probably be a kind of Catalan opening. But since I haven't played d5, I've just played with knight f6 and e6. I'm just not sure what this is called. So yeah, if anyone wants to do some research and let me know what this is called, I'd be interested to find out. Anyway, white took with the queen, which is probably a slight mistake. It's not huge, but it gives me a free tempo. I bring my knight out, kick the queen, and we're just out of the opening book. Let's see. And I went with the check. I could have played, and probably should have played d5 immediately, because this whole on d6 is kind of a weakness in this position. So I'm not sure, if that's something that I should have allowed, which I did in this game. So that's probably a better way of playing than what I played. But this keeps an edge too. Bishop b4 check, or keeps it about even, I guess, is the way things stand at this point. So this is fine. He blocked, and I went ahead and traded off the dark squared bishop. And he took back with the queen. Probably a little better is to take with the knight. A little more natural. But taking with the queen has its points too, because the knight is going to develop to a better square on c3. So let's see, I went with b6 here, so I can develop my bishop. He goes bishop g2. I get in bishop to b7 just in time, and he gets knight c3, and I castle. So I think everything is fine here. The only weakness in my position is this hole on d6, and then this backwards d pawn. It's not so easy for me to get in the d5 move now that white has got a little bit organized and concentrating his forces on the d file. So let's see, I went with rook c8. And then right here, if he were to play rook f to d1, that's the chess engine's top choice, then the engine would give an edge to white here. It's not a huge edge, but definitely a little something with this pressure on the d file and my backwards d pawn. So that's why I think, some of my moves were a mistake. So probably instead of bishop b4 check, the immediate d5 would have been a better way for me to play it. But other than that, it's not too bad. But right here, even after rook f d1, white has an edge, but it's still playable for black. That's what I mean to say. But instead, he went a3 here, and that's a blunder. And, if you look at the times, he's been playing every move in 2 seconds, except for, I think there was one move, that move was a pre-move, with 0 seconds. So every move in 2 seconds. And we were out of the opening book starting at move 5 here, and we're already up to move 12. So he's gone 7 moves past the opening book, and he's still blitzing out moves as if he knows everything that's going on. And a3 is just a mistake, and actually spot the mistake, so good for me. And I play the move knight a5. Yeah. So instead of a3, rook f d1 is the best move, but pretty much any other move would keep white with at least an even position. But this just blunders a pawn. He can't defend the c-pawn, and there's a problem with the fork on b3. So he played knight b5. And let's see. Yeah, if I go for the fork now, I wasn't sure that was working out. I probably should have checked that with the chess engine. I don't recall the chess engine giving anything better than knight takes c4, though. So anyway, the idea here is that I have this fork, but he can take on h2 and attack my rook, and at least he gets some compensation for the exchange. Whereas here I'm just a clean pawn up. So he has to move the queen. We went queen to b4. And now he's targeting this weakness in my camp. But I noticed that this knight here was also protecting. And so I kicked his knight away with a6. But an even stronger move, which the chess engine found for me, is a5, kicking the queen away. Because when the queen moves, the queen can't stay on this diagonal. So let's see, the chess engine gives queen to c5, but doesn't matter too much where the queen goes, because as soon as the queen moves, I can get in this d5 move, and then there's no longer a possibility of knight to d6. And I've got good pieces, and chess engine gives me a +2 edge, so 1 point for the pawn and another point for the position. So I'd be doing pretty well there. Here with a6, I stay a pawn up, but I don't have any great edge here. So he drops his knight into this d6 square, beyond being a pawn up. Knight takes, queen takes. And I chase his queen away, and I was worried that he was going to try and hold on to that square, but I think eventually I can drive it away with the knight and get in the move d5. So he just gave it up directly, dropped his queen back to d3, and I play the move d5. He goes rook a to c1, harassing my queen. And, the chess engine prefers the exchange here. I could have taken the rook, and this is just a trade of a queen for 2 rooks. But it's a little trickier to play this kind of position, 2 rooks versus the queen. In theory, my advantage has increased a little bit because the 2 rooks are supposed to be stronger than the queen. but it makes the game a little more complicated and perhaps difficult to handle in a blitz situation. So anyway, I don't think that Queen e7 was a particularly bad move there. I just wanted to point out the chess engine prefers to go for that configuration. Let's see, he opts in with knight g5. This is a mistake, and because I can just chase the knight back right away, and the knight doesn't have any good squares to go to. He chose to go back to h3, I guess, just to avoid admitting defeat and going back to f3. But let's see, I just centralized my rook here, and he went knight to f4. And so this is a real mistake, though. There's actually a tactic here. Let's see, so instead of that, he should have played rook f to e1. Well, pretty much any move other than knight f4 keeps white, well, you know, white is still a pawn down, but just a pawn down, doesn't decrease his edge anymore. The chess engine was also giving moves like e3 and f4 as ways to play the position, or rook f e1. So knight f4 is a mistake, and I start out exploiting this correctly. I throw in this trade of rooks. It's important to get the rook off of the diagonal so that he doesn't have bishop to h3 with the tempo on the rook after I move the e-pawn forward, and then I push the e-pawn forward. But there's another way to handle this situation. So if you want to see if you can find a tactic that wins a piece here, see if you can spot the idea. Okay, pause the video if you want time to think about it. I'm going to give the answer away now. The key point is that after I play e5, the knight has only one move. If you saw the game, you would notice this, that the knight has only the h3 square. And what you can do is you can actually take that square away with tempo by playing this way. g5, hitting the knight. The knight still only has one square to go to. It has to go back to h3. And then you can play g4, and the knight still has one square to go to. Back to f4. And now you can play e5, and the knight has no squares because you've taken away the h3 square with that pawn. So by doing that double pawn push with tempo, that allows you to trap the knight. So pretty cool tactic. Anyway, I missed that and played e5 immediately, which is a good move. It's like the second choice of the engine if you didn't notice the g5 tactic, because it drives the knight back, and I've got, I'm pawn up and I have this big center here. I went on with d4. Just thought I would trade off that light squared bishop, which is a strong piece here, and I don't have to always keep defending that d-pawn, which was maybe going to become weak in some cases. But he goes after the d-pawn immediately with e3. I think white played this part pretty well. Well, maybe not. I guess e3 runs into the move queen f3. I just didn't find this move right away. The immediate queen f3 is good. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, this e3 move, because it's taking advantage of this pin. If I take, my rook is loose down here. And the queen at the same time is still looking at the a6 pawn. But after queen f3, white really doesn't have time to take that pawn. I can start taking stuff over here on the king side, and if he's not careful, I'll get my rook to the second rank and threaten mate, and so things will fall apart pretty quickly there. So he has to respond over around his king here. He has no time to go pawn hunting over here on the queen side. So that's why the immediate queen f3 is the best move there. And I went with b5, which is just being a little too cautious. He went with f4, and then once again, queen f3 is the best move. I was a little worried after playing queen f3. I thought he would take here with a tempo on my knight. But it turns out that's still good for me because, all his pawns are weak. This pawn is not going anywhere and it's under attack. He can't take here because the e-pawn is still pinned. That's the idea of queen f3. Let's see, if he brings his rook over to chase my queen, then I can take here with check. And after an exchange, I can probably round up this pawn. Anyway, it's all looking good for me. So that immediate queen f3 right here, once again, well, queen f3, the move before and also here, would be better. Let's see, I traded first. And why this isn't as good is because now the knight takes back. a good play by white, defending his queen. So now queen f3 is not, it's still a good move, but it's not as strong as it was before, because I'm threatening to take the pawn, but it's no longer pinned, so he can take, and that's the correct response. So now we have to go into this endgame where I'm a pawn up, but no more, and certainly there are drawing chances. Lots of rook and pawn endgames can be drawn from here, particularly if the knights come off. There are still pawns on both sides, so I guess I still have all the winning chances. It's not like this is hopelessly drawn, but anyway, it's white has hopes of drawing it, I guess. So let's go forward some moves. We played some kind of natural moves, I think, and nothing too much changed in the evaluation during this part. And here I was attracted by the idea of knight to g4 and rook takes h2 mate. So that's a nice. Let's see if I can draw that. Yeah, knight there and rook there would be checkmate. And I didn't see a way for him to stop it. I guess, well, I was moving kind of quickly at this point. We had spent a lot of time, and I decided it was time to hurry up. But so anyway, this move is a foolish mistake. Knight g4. Rook a2 is the recommended move from the chess engine. And it's still in that range where black is better, but white has pretty good drawing chances by this point. So anyway, yeah, the more the pawns get reduced, the greater white's drawing chances become. But anyway, knight g4. After this, it's actually just a draw according to the computer, and so we can go forward here. I thought I would stay a pawn up, and I do, but unfortunately, it's the other pawns come off. We can just come forward, and this 2 versus 1, all on one side of the board, is a well-known book draw. And he plays it fine, but I mean, there's no reason to agree to a draw as long as there's still things going on, and you know, you can try and push those pawns forward and, you know, get his king and his rook into awkward positions, but there was no reason for white to blunder. It was just this move here. It's a one-move blunder that gives away the game. He had fought his way all the way back to a draw, and then gave it up with that one move. So. And most other moves will draw. Rook d1 was one of the top choices. Just drop the rook back, get away from any ideas of that skewer, and then the rook can harass my king from the back rank. It's not easy for me to come forward with his king here, so check on the h file will drive my king back, and it's just hard for me to make progress. So that's how the game really should have ended, but instead he made this one move that gives the game away, and well, once again, at least I spotted it, so I have to give myself some credit. And he resigned. Interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you again soon. Bye.